off all that money that he gets every month. So, so in that sense, there really wouldn't be a conflict. Just like you would vote on you could really technically vote on a fire. Well, you couldn't because the fire contract impacts retirees, right? Yeah. So, in that sense, you couldn't. But if it were a contract or something more driven down to teachers, then Mr. Seabury would have to recuse himself. Otherwise, there's no conflict voting in this particular venue. Okay. Any other discussion? I just want to add one comment to all the folks that have spoken tonight. It is very frustrating that we only are allowed to present a block of money. And certainly we've discussed getting greater control over the finances. If the council there were consensus to at least look at that issue, perhaps we can come in with an ad hoc next month to study that. There are cities and towns in Connecticut that have merged the finance departments with the school in the city, and of course they need a few more staff to do it. But the objective would be to cash in on all the economies of scales and really understand where the money's being spent. But if that's something that interests this council, we certainly can look at that over the summer as we move forward. Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question for you, frankly, a clarification on my own part. Motions have been made and seconded on this, and this, when Councilman Riley in the committee meeting moved to adopt the mayor's proposed Board of Education budget with the stipulation that the $500,000 Honeywell lease be paid by the Board of Ed during the 2008-2009 school year. My question, sir, is this. Should this be defeated now, or should we not get a significant number of votes to pass this? Then, if the budget passes, the entire budget passes, can you explain to me what would happen to that lease in the whole scheme of things?
Well, I think it would make it murky. I think, and I would encourage the members of the council to support the budget report only because it's very clear what the expectation would be for the $500,000 of Honeywell lease. If the report were rejected, for example, tonight, it would be murky as to what would happen with that money. I could very well see them coming in with another request. Doesn't mean we would grant it to them, but they would come in with a request later in the year saying we need an extra $500,000 to pay this. But I think when we talk about making statements, it's not everything we want. It's not perfect, but it certainly sends a message to the Board of Ed and to the superintendent that, look, you're going to have to tighten your belt just as we're tightening our belts over on the city side, and so I think it's a nice way to do that. If you reject the report, it does get a little murky. As Mr. Sinisi has aptly pointed out, somebody's on the hook somewhere for that, and I think there'll be a little bit of argument back and forth with the superintendent and myself. So my preference is that we adopt the report as presented. Okay.
My colleagues on the council right here, there's a lot of questions that came up tonight. And I just wanted to be noted that unless I'm missing somebody, I don't see anybody from the Board of Ed here that could have answered that. Is that correct?
I haven't seen anybody.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Duly noted, Mr. Seabury. Any other discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on adopting the Board of Ed budget. All those in favor of adoption, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those in the negative, please signify by saying nay. Nay. Could the nays please raise their hand? It would be Mrs. McMahon in the negative, Mr. Perkins in the negative, Mr. Visconti in the negative, Mr. Sinisi in the negative, Mr. Esposito in the negative, Mr. Sadi, Mr. Rotella, Mrs. Diggs, and Mr. Levy. Okay, now can we count them up there, Doc? 9 negative, there being 10 is 19, so that'd be 10 yeses, 10-9, so the budget is adopted. No, let me just make a clarification. Thank you, Mr. Rotella. The budget passed 10-9, but we're not having to amend the budget related to the Honeywell lease because I didn't program it there. So we just simply made a statement that it's going to be the Board of Ed's responsibility to pay for the Honeywell lease. So we don't have to meet the 14-vote requirement because there's no line item in the budget that reflects the Honeywell lease. Okay? All right. Just want to make sure we're clear as to what the legislative intent is here. Okay, we have public safety, public works, I believe, next.
Public Works.
And that would be Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Public Works Committee meeting was called to order on April 24th, 2008 at 6:06 p.m. by Councilman Johnson, Chair. Committee members, Councilman Shay Nagashat, Councilman Curran, Councilman Calandrino, and Councilman Rotello entered at 6:25 p.m. were also present. Also in attendance were Mayor Mark D. Boughton, David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance, Antonio I. Dirola, Director of Public Works, Sandy Moy, Executive Director of Cherrywell Park, Nick DePlanis, Director of Recreation. Ex officio members, Councilman Cabo, Councilwoman Stanley, Councilman Seabury, Councilman Levy, Councilwoman Diggs, Councilwoman McMahon, Councilman Tykoltz, and members of the public were also present. Councilman Arconti entered at 7:20 p.m. Director of Finance, David St. Hilaire, turned the discussion to the Director of Public Works, Antonio I. Dirola. Mr. I. Dirola gave a brief recap of the reorganization of the Public Works Department last year. The Construction Services Division was created to bring outside services in-house. The Public Works Administration was created from employees from other departments. He gave an overview of the soft savings on some of the past year's building projects. Mr. St. Hilaire stated that 2 lead park maintainers have been added and that Public Works bears to a large extent the utility cost increases the city has been experiencing. Public buildings, no discussion. City Hall building, no discussion. Library building, no discussion. Police station building, maintenance of building and structure were discussed. Senior Center building, no discussion. Or library building. Heating fuel cost estimates and cleaning services were discussed. Park building, cleaning was discussed. Director of Public Works, positions and salaries were extracted from the highway and engineering departments for the new department. Professional services were discussed. Highways, overtime salaries, leased equipment, curbs and sidewalks, anticipated reduction in state funding, and sidewalk maintenance were discussed. State aid highway project, no discussion. Snow and ice removal. The shortfall carried down from state cuts and magic salt were discussed. Street lighting, maintenance, responses from CL&P regarding repairs and utility costs for street lights were discussed. Park maintenance and forestry, discussion regarding the extraction of the forestry department from park maintenance department. Forestry, establishment of new department. 2 new positions to allow for maintenance of greenways and proportional funding from parks maintenance department were discussed. Public buildings maintenance and repair. Honeywell contract and systems and outside services were discussed. Equipment maintenance, no discussion. Recycling, solid waster, outside services were discussed. Engineering. The reorganization, engineering positions, and professional services were discussed. Construction services, extraction from positions from other department for a new department was discussed. Sewer fund, indirect revenue was discussed. Water fund, seasonal water usage, water levels, pending orders from DEP, and nitrogen credits were discussed. Recreation department, part-time ranger positions, fee structure, and concession lease at Danbury Town Park were discussed. Cherrywell Park Authority, Jerry Daly, chair of the Cherrywell Park Authority, spoke regarding additional requests for the park. Sandy Moy, executive director, read and discussed a list of additional budget requests. Mayor Boughton indicated that there may be some funding available for only the capital side of the requests. Revenue from the rentals of the facility were discussed. Cultural Commission, no discussion. Lake Kenosha Commission, no discussion. Ives Center for Performing Arts, funding, seasonal programming, outside services, funding for director salary, and transitional costs were discussed. Danbury Museum Authority, transition funds and revenues were discussed. Councilman Calandrino moved to accept the budget as presented, seconded by Shay Nagashath. Motion approved by unanimous vote. Councilman Kern moved to adjourn at 8:15 p.m. Second by Councilman Calandrino. Motion approved unanimous vote. Respectfully submitted, James Johnson, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's your pleasure, Council, on Public Works? Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd move to accept the recommendation of the committee and to accept the proposed budget.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Riley. Discussion under Public Works. We'll start with Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Your Honor. While I think the Director of Public Works has done a great job in the Public Works Department in this report, I agree with generally. However, there's sort of a non-Public Works issue that I've taken issue with since it came up initially, is the Ives Center and municipal funding for that. My comments and concerns are well known and on the record before this council and other meetings, and as such I would like to move at this time that we remove the funding for the Ives Center and transfer that to the fund balance.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded by Mr. Sadi, seconded by Mr. Shinisi, related to the Ives Center Authority to strike their funding and transfer it to fund balance. Discussion of the amendment to the department report. Mr. Shinisi.
Again, through the chair. When this was first presented to the council, it was presented as a self-funding entity after the initial funding. It was my understanding that the initial request was for $75,000 to buy the assets and $25,000 as seed money to get the entity on its way, to get it moving. That the new authority was not to assume any of the debt from the old authority, and I think, I'm not sure, but I think some of that debt could have been paid. But then going forward, that no additional funding was to be made to the authority. Now, I know last budget we gave $50,000 last year, which is $25,000 over what we said we were going to do, and now $80,000 is being funded to pay for a director, the way I read it here. And that's not what the presentation from the prior finance director, Dina DiOrio, presented to us when she gave us this 5-year plan. So I feel as a councilman that I was misled, and I supported the Ives Center 100%. I think it was needed for the city, but some truths are not being known, and I can't support continually giving money without having some feedback of what's really going on in the Ives Center. It was my understanding that it had a very successful year this past year. So did it make money? Did it lose money? We don't know, but apparently it must have lost money because we're giving additional money to the Ives Center. So I can't support giving $80,000 without having any type of knowledge of what's really going on. So I'm going to have to agree with the amendment and have the $80,000 removed. I mean, at some point in time, they could come back once a formal presentation has been given to this council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shinisi. Any other discussion related to the Ives Center? Seeing none, then Mr. Cava, and then Mr. Rotella.
Thank you, Your Honor. With all due respect to my colleague, Mr. Shinisi, I can't be clear about this, but I do remember there was some discussion at the time when this Ives Authority, the creation of the Ives Authority, was presented to us. And I do recall that several times it was mentioned that this was the initial request. There may be a point or time where they may come back and ask or need more money to help get themselves off the ground. And I'm not really sure whether that discussion happened here on the dais or if it happened offline, but I do know that there was discussion, and I was aware that there was a possibility that we were going to need to fund this a few years in to get the authority off the ground. So I will be supporting the budget as presented without the amendment, and I'm hoping that the Ives Authority turn out to be a tremendous asset here to the city, as it already started out with a great year. I'm hoping this year will be even better, and we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cava. Mr. Rotella, your hand was up.
Thanks, Your Honor. Without taking a particular position on the genesis of the Ives Center or whether $80,000 is appropriate at this time or not, or whether we should have seen this coming or whether it was presented to us as a possibility or not last year, I would like to know what would happen if we deleted that fund. What would happen to the operation of the Ives Center? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rotella. If we delete the funding, frankly, we're just not going to have a season. I mean, that's the bottom line. This is seed money that is used to seed the authority. It's not necessarily the salary of the director. She has a fundraising goal that she has to meet, and this by no means is a very small part of their overall budget. And to editorialize just very quickly, this council gave $75,000 to a film festival for 3 days worth of entertainment. without batting an eyelash. We're talking about $80,000 that'll impact, except for Mr. Levy. He batted twice and then got a little twitchy on top of it. This authority will impact 25,000 to 30,000 people this summer over really an entire summer. So when you look at your value for the dollar and your impact on the community, there's really, no comparison. But the net result will be that there frankly won't be a season. And Mr. Shinisi is right. Look, we certainly want to wean them off of any city funding. That's ultimately the goal. And this money is being transferred over from the YMCA, who also was on a 3-year program to get them up and running. They dropped from $180,000 now to $100,000. Actually, there was a change in grants, so they're even a little bit less than that, because we're going to begin to wean them off of their city funding. So that's really ultimately the goal of what we're trying to do. So there's not a net impact, an increase to the budget from last year on this. But basically, that's going to be the result. Further discussion. Seeing no other discussion, I will try your minds on the amendment. All those in favor of stripping the Ives Authority of their $80,000? I gotta say what it is. And kick the puppy and don't walk the, never mind. Don't walk anybody across the street. I'm sorry, Councilman, that was wrong. All those in favor of the amendment defunding the Ives Authority, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, that's Mr. Shinisi and Mr. Sadi are in favor, and Mr. Visconti, that's 3, and opposed to beating up puppies and taking the Ives Authority money away, signify by saying nay. All right, that would be the balance, I think. Any abstentions? Okay. I'm sorry. Further discussion under Public Works. Mr. Shinisi.
Thank you again. Through the chair, again, just want to reiterate what Councilman Sadi is saying. I think the Public Works Director is doing a great job in the department, in the way he's managing it and with the different departments that he set up. But one of my pet peeves last year, again, is overtime salaries. So I'm going to ask the Public Works Director again, is adequate funding for overtime, is it in this budget, in your opinion? I know last year we were short quite a bit.
We've had discussions. Mostly our overtime is driven by weather-related incidents. We had not only a bunch of snowstorms, some ice storms, which seem to be more typical than snowstorms, but we've also been experiencing during the spring and summer some of these heavy wind and rain events, which impact our regular overtime. So we project out, we trend out 3 to 5 years. The numbers that you see in front of you are those trends. And as long as the weather doesn't really create havoc on us, we should be fine. We've worked really hard with our finance director to really do these trends and really take a look at our projections and incorporate the salary increases into those trends. So I feel these numbers should definitely be sufficient for anything that may come down the road. But then again, could easily be made a liar.
Again, I have
Thank you.
one more other question.
Yep.
Again, with the Danbury Museum Authority, again, this year we took them off of 501c3 and actually made them an authority. And one of the reasons why I went with approving making an authority was to help them reduce costs. One of the things that they were able to do is use our buying power to help them reduce the utility costs, which should help reduce their overall operations. So last year's budget, I think they got like $35,000, which was increased this year to $95,000. So that was a substantial increase. So I guess my question would be through the mayor, because I don't see anybody here from the authority, to say why would they need such an increase when they should have a decrease in other areas that should be enough to cover for any maintenance that they should need to do. So I don't understand why they would need an increase from us.
Thank you. Their total request as an authority was approximately $110,000. I reduced them with the assumption of some savings in some of those areas that you pointed to, $95,000. they do a significant amount of fundraising also on their own. Their budget is not $95,000. We knew, unlike the Ives Center, where there's an opportunity to generate a significant amount of revenue through ticket sales and T-shirts and things like that, that the Museum Authority really doesn't have those same access to be able to generate the revenue that they need. Based on my discussions with the executive director, 95,000 was the approximate, although she says it's a little bit less than what they need, but they'll make it work, approximate amount of money that they're coming up short each year. If you remember during the discussions of creating the authority, our concern was that if the Museum Historical Society 501c3 collapses, we own all those buildings that are out there. They're on each one of the deeds, which means we'll have to go in at a much higher expense, reorganize them, clean them, set them up, and try to develop some kind of way of showing those buildings off and celebrating the history of Danbury. So that's really where that figure is derived from. Bridget will tell you it's probably about $15,000 too low. I said, I'm sorry, that's the best we're going to be able to do this year. It is a $30,000 increase over their prior, $60,000 increase, I think, over their prior things. But remember, we own that, that authority now is pretty much part of the city's assets. I'll also tell you that I did encourage her to continue to generate revenue and raise revenue, particularly through the gift shop, which tends to do very well around the holiday season. So they've got some ideas about how to do that. Are we ever going to get them weaned off? Unlike the Ives Center, I don't foresee it's a time when we'll never be supplementing their operations out there. I just don't see it, because of how many people they handle each year. I know that was long-winded. I'm sorry.
I'd like to follow up with that. Given the past that we've had with the Richter Park Authority, and there's a lack of communication between that authority and this council, I don't want to start setting trends with other authorities to saying they not have accountability to this council. And I would think that we need to send a strong message to all our authorities, and if I need to put this to an ad hoc or make an informal motion at the next meeting, I will do that. The authorities must be accountable to this council, and they need to start giving reports, whether it be a monthly report or a quarterly report. We need to know what's going on, and we shouldn't have to go beg them for financial statements or requests for data. We should get that voluntarily, so we know what's going on, that we know that the museum is actually funding the buildings adequately, because we don't know. It'll be too late when the roof starts collapsing and falling in that we start getting involved, and then it's too late. We need to know now where they're spending their money, that we can look at their expenditures to make sure that it's being applied correctly, and also, again, using our resources to assist them. I know Rick Palando does a great job with the buildings here, but I think his department needs to start getting involved with them to make sure that their buildings are up to code, that they are being properly maintained, because if we don't follow up on them, no one will. And it'll be too late when the roofs start collapsing. That would be a much bigger dime to do it, and if we should do it now. So, I mean, I just needed to say that we need to start making these authorities accountable, because we can't keep throwing good money into something that's not going to be worthwhile. Thank you.
I sense the councilman's frustration, but let me just say, the statutes allow you to create authorities specifically because they're not accountable to us. That's the whole point, is that they're independent operating authority. To the extent that we're not there to oversee and manage their daily operations. Otherwise, we might as well make them a city department, and then they'll have full accounting reportability. However, having said that, there's certainly no reason why a quarterly report, say 4 times a year, couldn't be provided to the council, giving an overview of the operations, revenue generated, expenditures, that kind of thing. But we do not manage the internal expenditures, nor do we prioritize their operations of their facility. That's done by the boards that we appoint. Certainly I think we can strike a balance there to give a little more feedback to the council, particularly when we're funding them, to give them some feedback about how money's spent, where it's spent, maybe on a quarterly basis. I'll talk to the executive directors about doing that, and we'll include that either in a mailer or just in your council packet once a quarter. We can do that for you. Okay. Further discussions? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on acceptance of the Public Works budget. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Negatives, please signify by saying nay. And if you could raise your hand, I'd appreciate it. That would be Mr. Perkins, Mr. Shinisi, Mr. Sadi, and Mr. Levy. Health, Housing, Public Safety, and Social Services. That would be Mr. Councilwoman Diggs.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Health, Housing, Public Safety, and Social Services Committee meeting was called to order on April 22, 2008 at 7:30 p.m. by Councilman Charles Trombetta, Chair. Committee members Councilwoman Diggs, Councilman Knapp, Councilwoman McMahon, and Councilman Esposito were also present. Also in attendance were Mayor Mark D. Boughton, David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance, Dan Garrett, Assistant Director of Finance, Paul Estevan, Airport Administrator, Scott Leroy, Director of Health, Deputy Chief Terrence Shanahan, Chief Alan Baker, Captain Thomas Wendell, Chief Jeffrey Harold, and Pat Waldron, Director of Veterans Advisory. Ex officio members Councilman Cabo, Councilwoman Stanley, Councilman Seabury, Councilman Levy, Councilman Visconti, Councilwoman Teichels, and members of the public were also present. Councilman Arconti entered the meeting at 7:20 p.m. Director of Finance David St. Hilaire gave an overview of the narratives. He discussed the evaluation of historical Sorry about that. David St. Hilaire gave an overview of the narratives. He discussed the evaluation of historical expenses and his goal to obtain tight control of overtime expenses. Police Department. The proposed budget was reviewed. Special services, leased equipment, new vehicle leases, the Public Safety Board, workers' comp were also discussed. Assistant Finance Director Dan Garrett provided some clarifications to the workers' comp, stating that a safety and health awareness programs have been established in an attempt to reduce claims. Chief Baker thanked the Common Council for their generosity to the police department. He also thanked the mayor for initiating the construction project for the new police station. Animal control, no discussion. Fire department, the proposed budget was reviewed. Overtime, training courses, training requirements, professional services, leased equipment, maintaining building structures, Engine 24, clothing and dry goods, grants, communication equipment, public safety, equipment and Worcester and Citizens Homes companies were also discussed. Chief Harold discussed his commitment, maintain quality of service while reducing expenses. Building inspector, no discussion. Department of Civil Preparedness, no discussion. Department of Consumer Protection, no discussion. Unified Neighborhood Inspection Team, no discussion. Health, Housing, and Welfare, no discussion. Veterans Advisory Center, flag purchases and caseload were discussed. Commission on Aging, no discussion. Elderly Transportation, no discussion. Ambulance, no discussion. Councilman Knapp moved to accept the budget as presented. Second by Councilwoman McMahon. Motion passed by unanimous vote. Councilman Knapp moved to adjourn at 7:31 p.m. Second by Councilwoman McMahon. Motion passed by unanimous vote. Respectfully submitted, Dorothy Goya Stanley, Recording Secretary.
Thank you, Councilwoman. What's your pleasure, Councilwoman Teichels?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to receive the report and accept the budget as presented.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Johnson. Discussion under Health, Housing, Welfare, Public Safety. Any discussion? Nobody wants to bother the chief tonight, huh? Okay. Seeing none then, I'll try your minds on acceptance of the report. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Mr. Levy, Mr. Rotella, and Mr. Perkins in the negative. Got that down?
I'm trying to stay consistent.
You're doing well.
Grant agencies, chaired by Mr. Riley.
Your Honor, if you would forgive me, I have a wicked back problem. No, seriously, it's a little back problem.
Sounds like a workman's comp claim to me, but go ahead, Mr. Riley. Feel free.
Your Honor, it was all those 33, 34 years bending over the desk with the little...
Tough job. Been there, done that.
Okay. Here we go. It's a long one. The April 23rd, 2008 meeting of the Common Council Ad Hoc Committee for Grant Agencies was called to order by Chairman Robert Riley at 7:30 p.m. Present were committee members Joe Cabo, Ben Chinese, Jack Knapp Jr., Robert Riley, and Greg Seabury. Also present were Finance Director David St. Hilaire, Assistant Finance Director Daniel Garrick, and Common Council members Robert O'Conti, Mike Caladrino, Jane Diggs, Louise McMahon, Paul Rotello, Colleen Stanley, and Mary Teichel. Chairman Riley said that they would review the agency's requests in alphabetical order. Dream Homes Community Center, Healing Hearts Regional Hospice, Interfaith AIDS Ministry, Midwestern Council Alcoholism, Northwest Regional Mental Health, Regional Hospice, RSVP, TBICO, and We Care. ARC. Reverend P.J. Leopold complained that she was surprised that they were denied the 22% increase that they had requested. She said this funding has not had an increase in years. Mr. Chinese asked if there had been a reduction in any of the grants for this program, and Reverend Leopold said no. This was the only reduction. Mr. Cavo asked about the full-page News Times ad that they ran about the ICE partnership. Reverend Leopold said it cost $2,300 and it was paid for by an anonymous gift. She added that none of the city funding goes toward their work with immigrants. Finance Director David St. Hilaire said due to the budgetary constraints, most of the grant agencies were kept as the same level of funding last year. The mayor didn't want to cut their funding, so they kept them all at the same level as the previous year. Mr. St. Hilaire Oh, thank you. Good? Yes? Oh. Explained that the city department budgets were cut rather than take funding away from these agencies, so there was no way that they could accommodate the request for increases. Community Action Committee. Linda Armstrong said food and fuel are the two key words. Normally they serve 11 families. Right now they're at 3 times that amount. Connecticut Institute for Communities. Jim Maloney, president, said there are 6 key points they want to do, but the bulk of the funds will be used to maintain the Harambe program. He said that they are hoping that this additional funding will help them get more money from other sources, such as grants and private foundations. Mr. Chinese suggested they ask Wisconsin University to donate the use of the Armory building, which would reduce their expenses significantly by eliminating the rent. Mr. Maloney said the state will not do that, but a deal has been made for the city to buy the building once the new arts building is finished at Wisconsin. War Memorial. Mr. Riley said the War Memorial is experiencing difficult times. They just don't have the membership to cover their expenses. He suggested that they merge the funding for the YMCA with this and split it down the middle. Mr. Chinese said they should wait until they get to the YMCA to discuss this idea. Mr. Chinese said it seems that many of the agencies serve the same purpose and asked Mr. St. Hilaire how they can prevent the duplication of services. Mr. St. Hilaire said it may seem like there is some overlap on a lot of these programs, but they are distinctly different. He said the mayor insisted on keeping everything the same as last year. Any programs that were increased were done so because they were joined with another program. 6 more pages, don't feel bad. Hispanic Center of Greater Danbury. Executive Director Eva Colon thanked them for changing the amount of their grant. She said she has worked hard to get the agency back on track by finding out what the needs of the community are and providing programs to satisfy them. She added that they recognize the need to take accountability for what they do. Mr. Chinese said last year their funding was taken away because of problems with the previous management. He said there is currently an ad hoc committee looking into reinstating last year's funds. Mr. Cabo asked about the full-page News Times ad they ran about the ICE partnership. Ms. Colon said it cost $1,196 and it was made by a private donation. Barbara Roos, Secretary to the Board of Directors, then said Ms. Colon came on board. The face of the agency has totally changed. Boughton Street YMCA. Mr. Cabo asked Mr. St. Hilaire to explain the change in the funding. Mr. St. Hilaire said a few years ago the city stepped in when the YMCA needed major repairs. That funding was maintained to help them do the improvements, but now since they are making money, it's time to cut back. These extra funds were split between the Connecticut Institute for Communities and the Scott Phantom Museum, which will no longer be a grant agency. The museum will be run by an authority which is funded in a different manner than the grants are. Mr. Riley again suggested merging the proposed funding for the War Memorial and the YMCA and splitting the dollar amount down the middle. Mr. St. Hilaire said the War Memorial is in a unique situation because it is in danger of closing. He said these two agencies need to work this out between themselves. Mr. Riley said the War Memorial was built to honor the dead and service the living, but they are in a bad way and Danbury cannot afford to lose that program. Mr. St. Hilaire said the council needs to consider who the money will help more. Volunteer Center. Patty Cohen Heck, I hope I pronounced it right, president stated that they have been in existence since 1974 and their allocation amount from the city has not increased since then. Every group in Danbury looks to them to provide volunteers, but they need additional funding at least to bring them up to every other non-profit in the community. This past year, they went to the other towns for funding. They received $20,000 gift from the mayor, and the rest of the money they got from sweat equity.
It was from the mayor's ball there, Mr. Riley. I just want to be clear. I don't have I don't give out $20,000 to everybody that walks in the door. So.
Okay. Mr. Riley thanked everyone for coming and said that they would consider all that had been said. At this point, Valerie Ventura Asadi of Family and Children Aid Harmony House came forward and asked to speak. She said due to restructuring, they had missed the deadline and they were hoping that the council would still consider the funding with them at the same amount in the past year. Mr. St. Hilaire said the reality is that this budget is very tight and the board needs to focus on the essentials. Mr. Cabo said even in better times, these agencies had to take cuts. He added that the taxpayers have let the council know that they want the money to stop going out. He encouraged all the agencies to go out and find other sources of funding in addition to the city. Mr. Riley reiterated his suggestion about merging the funds from the War Memorial and the YMCA. He also mentioned the reinstatement of the 7-8 funds for the Hispanic Center. He also suggested giving the Volunteer Center additional funding. Mr. Cabo made a motion to recommend the budget as presented by the mayor, with the exception of the merging the funding for the YMCA and the War Memorial and splitting it evenly between the two agencies. He added that he does not think they should do anything regarding the reinstatement of the Hispanic Center's 7-8 funding, and they should let the ad hoc committee handle that issue. This motion was seconded by Mr. Seabury. Mr. Knapp asked about the ad hoc committee, and Mr. Cabo said it was formed to find out the specific objectives of the agency, and that information has not been provided. He added that they deserve to have that information before deciding on giving money back. Mr. Cabo said he had not heard from the mayor on this issue. Mr. Chinese made a motion to merge the funding for the YMCA and War Memorial, but reduce the amount they should get, that they each get, and use the difference for some of the other agencies, including Family and Children's Services. Mr. Cabo said he appreciates the suggestion, but finds it difficult to support it. He said his suggestion about the YMCA War Memorial situation was because they are similar agencies that do the same thing. He then said he would prefer to leave everyone flat funded as proposed by the mayor. Mr. Seabury said he agreed with Mr. Cabo. Mr. Chinese withdrew his motion to amend Mr. Cabo's motion since there was no second. Chairman Riley called for a vote on Mr. Cabo's motion and was passed with 4 votes. Mr. Chinese abstained from the vote. At 9:43 p.m., Mr. Seabury made a motion to adjourn, and Mr. Knapp seconded the motion. It was carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. What's your pleasure, Council, Mr. Calvo?
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we receive the communication and accept the committee's report as presented.
It's been made and seconded by Mr. Knapp. Discussion under this department report. Mrs. Diggs.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have some written comments, so please bear with me on this issue. I'll be voting against the grant agency's budget because it does not include funding for the Hispanic Center. I sat in on the committee meeting on the 23rd and left after the committee had stated the Hispanic Center was receiving $27,000. However, learned the following morning after reading in the News Times that it was voted upon not to fund the Hispanic Center any amount because an ad hoc committee was supposed to have met to handle the issue of their funding. There were 24 agencies requesting funding. 16 of the agencies simply came to the front, and the chairman stated how much they were receiving from the city, and the agency said thank you, and no questions asked from the committee. The other 7 agencies were asked questions, but quite clearly when the Hispanic Center approached the dais, it was something that really resembled an ad hoc committee meeting. Several questions were asked, and in specific their ad in the News Times about the ICE partnership, and it was stated the ad was funded by a private donation. I was pleased by that answer. My focus was then on what the Hispanic does in their mission as a nonprofit agency. And they were asked about their mission and what had changed from last year to this year. Ms. Colon clearly stated their mission was more on inclusion activities and English as a second language, because last year there was more of an emphasis on activism and they had swayed from their mission. The Hispanic Center was even asked about the amount of the budget. You know what? I don't believe that any other agency was really asked the amount of their budget. I was impressed that the amount requested from the city was only 6% of their total budget, and they are now receiving funding from private donations and foundations. For a nonprofit agency, this is admirable. Of the 16 agencies, I don't know what their budget is because the questions because that question was not asked, as well as the other 7 agencies, or their purpose, because that question was not asked of many of the agencies. So what more questions can be asked of the Hispanic Center? All the questions were asked on April 23rd. Why do you need an ad hoc committee to ask the same questions? The executive director, as well as the chairman of the board, stood in front of the dais and at the microphone and asked the committee if they had additional questions, and they said no. And the committee thanked them, which included the chair, Bob Rowley, the president of our Common Council, Joe Calvo, and the majority leader, Greg Seabury, and Jack Knapp. Personally, I feel the Hispanic Center has clearly had their ad hoc committee, and I honestly applaud their efforts in turning around their goals in 1 year. I want to make the motion to amend the grant agency's funding to include the Hispanic Center in the amount of $27,000, and now to convene an ad hoc committee meeting to determine their funding.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Chianese. Discussion related to adding $27,000 back into the Hispanic Center budget as the amendment. Mr. Visconti.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be brief, short, to the point, no pun intended.
Not on your birthday.
I have mind this, the committee that was formed in January, I believe, is when the ad hoc committee was formed, and we since have not been able to meet for whatever reason may be. And I think it's important that we do meet and come back with some kind of report to the committee as a whole.
If I could just interject there, that ad hoc committee is for this fiscal year, not next fiscal year. So just so we understand the distinction.
Okay.
Just so we're clear.
My mistake then.
No problem. Further discussion, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through the chair, if we might ask the director to come before, so I might ask a question.
Sure. Ms. Cologne.
Good evening. I'm Eva Colon. I'm the executive director for the Hispanic Center.
Good evening. As you know, it's been a very difficult time for all of us, and most certainly it's a difficult time for the Hispanic Center. And I was the chair of the committee that held back funds last year because of the situation of getting involved with things that maybe we should not have done. Okay, I realize that at this time that the Hispanic Center has turned around. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and if you would be so kind, could you elaborate for the council and the mayor what is going on now different than what it was, let's say, a year ago? Thank you very much.
Sure. I'd like to say, first of all, that I've been on staff with the Hispanic Center for the past 7 months, and during my time there, the board has worked really, really hard at looking at their mission and revising it. And with that, I've also worked with them in realigning our programs to address the mission. And with that, there are 4 specific pillars that the agency is looking at and focusing on. The first is our ESL and acculturation program, which speaks to, again, acculturating folks in the community who are monolingual to become bilingual, if you will, and to acculturate into our society and our norms. Secondly, our focus is health, is on education, prevention. We have programs on breast cancer awareness specific to the Latinas in the community. We have worked with the AIDS community. We have several programs that really speak to the Hispanic community and addresses the prevention issues that we want them to take care, self-care, and all that. The next issue that we look at is advocacy. And advocacy is, we do several types of advocacy. There's advocacy, as we call the small A, where we do every day with our clients who walk in the door. We advocate on multiple levels for them, receiving services, referring them, and whatnot. And then we look at the bigger A, which we call the big advocacy. And that advocacy is around universal health care, making sure that all our people that we serve are receiving adequate services and care. and our legal piece. And our legal piece is more around connecting them and referring them to services such as a small claims court, how to fill out a lease, what does a lease mean, what are the ramifications after signing a lease. That sort of education is what we do in our legal component. And those are the 4 specific pillars of our mission today as I stand here before you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Any further questions for Ms. Colon?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further discussion related to Mrs. Diggs' amendment. Mrs. Stanley.
Thank you very much. Just a really quick question. You mentioned that you help provide questions for health, and do you provide those services to other people other than Hispanics?
We don't turn anyone away. Anyone who walks through the doors of the Hispanic Center are served, and our health services are predominantly a referral service. So when folks come through the door and they have an issue with a bill, say, for example, at the hospital, how do I navigate that system? How do I get on a pay system? What programs are available that would help me pay for that bill? So we will walk them through that process. We will help them write letters of support in terms of their budget. This is their income. Here's the verification, and how can we get, this person paying their bill. So they're more referrals. What we do is referral.
Okay, and just to follow up, and what would you think the percentage of other people other than Hispanics coming in and asking for services?
We do the Hispanic and Latino community. So I would say that 98% of the people who work in are Latino and Hispanic, and the other 2% would be bilingual individuals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Any further discussion related? We're on the amendment now. Mr. Shanisi.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you know, I was on this committee, and I did make the motion to fund the Hispanic Center back then. Of course, it wasn't seconded by my esteemed colleagues. But what I said at that meeting, and I'm going to say here tonight, that I was in favor of funding the Hispanic Center, but I was not in favor of funding the Hispanic Center twice. Even though there's an ad hoc that's for this year's budget, but I was not in favor of doing funding for this year's budget of $27,000, and also approving funding for next year's budget for, according to the motion, $27,000. So while I'm in favor of this motion this evening of $27,000, when that ad hoc finally does meet, I will not be in favor of voting for the $27,000 for this year's budget. So you're not kind of like double dipping in a way of getting $52,000 from the city within a short period of time. So I just want to make sure that would be my feelings on this subject. It's unfortunate that the request came so late in our budget year that it's kind of lumping 2 requests together. But again, we're in a financial difficulty throughout our budget, and it'd be very difficult to fund twice the amount of money. So I just want to make that for the record. I will be in favor of funding this request this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Further discussion, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Your Honor. Not a question through the chair, but a comment. I think that the issues brought before us in the last 15 or 20 minutes on the grant agencies underscores the need for revamping as you proposed in item 6. This is an issue that has come up under previous councils, previous mayors. We thought that separating out the issue into a separate ad hoc might address it. I think clearly that hasn't been the case, and so it obviously underscores a need for item 6 to move forward with regard to redesigning the grant agency system. With that, for reasons of conflict of interest, I'll be abstaining both for any amendments on this particular budget report as well as the overall budget report with regard to grant agencies. Thank you.
I just want to add that the separate committee has only further complicated our efforts here, so I think it's high time we revamp this whole process. With all due respect to Ms. Colon, really has nothing to do with the amendment, but I think your point on, Mr. Sadi, with that discussion. Further discussion on the amendment, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just like to as my peers begin to look at this and decide what they want to do, I would just like to pass on to you, if I might take liberties, I realize church and state, a separation of the powers, but if you'd be so kind, I'd like to just read a very short from Paul, Gospel of Paul, and I think it targets right into the whole thing tonight. It's a very short quote. Care for the needy, comfort the distressed, befriend the rejected, do all these things, and God will be pleased. So as you ponder your vote, think about that, because that's the word of the Lord, and as he sees how we should act. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Riley, any further discussion about we're on the amendment? Mr. Cavo.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to just thank Ms. Colon for coming tonight again, as she did on the Budget Ad Hoc Committee evening. What I'm talking about here, and what I mentioned the night of the Budget Ad Hoc Committee, is to do with process. It's process. This was sent last January to an ad hoc committee to determine whether or not the funding should be restored to the Hispanic Center because of the turmoil that was going on inside their organization at the time we were deliberating our budget for the 07-08 year. The ad hoc committee was formed and has not met. And I, for one, the night of the the budget committee meeting, was not prepared to ask questions to the Hispanic Center specifically related to what I have planned to do in the ad hoc committee meeting. Also, members of this council that may have wanted to attend that ad hoc committee meeting to ask their own questions would have been denied the right that night to ask those questions, because they probably were not expecting that those questions would have been asked in that type of format. So it was with that in mind that everyone on this council has the opportunity to come to that ad hoc meeting knowing its specific purpose. And I want that process to be followed. And that's what I'm asking for, and that's what I'm asking of this council tonight, is respect the process. We have an ad hoc committee formed. We're waiting for them to meet. We're waiting for them to do their due diligence. We're giving everyone on this council an opportunity to come and ask their specific questions. We'll have them answered, and then a report will be given back to this council, and then the motion on whether to restore the funding or not will come before this council properly. So I just want to be clear on that, and I just want to let everyone know that that's my intent in this, and that's where I am on this. So, thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Mr. Cavo. Any other discussion? Mr. Calandrino, then Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, could you read the amendment again? I forgot what it is.
The amendment is to restore $27,000 to the Hispanic Center's budget in the grant agency section of the report.
Thank you.
Perkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. Through you to Councilman Cavo or Councilman Riley. When was the...
Excuse me, Mr. Perkins. Unfortunately, you can't address other members in the dais with questions. Okay. But any other discussion? Mrs. Diggs for the second and last time on this amendment.
Okay. I'm a bit confused, and I know all about due process, but I'm just a bit confused. Well, in terms of the grant agencies that met on April 27th, I thought that the Hispanic Center came and they gave their proposal and they provided us with feedback. We provided them saying that we would give them $27,000, and that was for this year, this fiscal year coming up, 2008-2009. So I think that's what we all heard. But I guess I'm kind of confused about the $25,000 that was supposed to have gone to an ad hoc committee meeting. My amendment to the budget is for the budget of 2008-2009 to amend the motion, saying I want to make the motion to amend the grant agency's funding to include the Hispanic Center in the amount of $27,000 for the year 2008-2009.
No, that motion would be out of order, Mrs. Diggs. We're on the 2008, the next budget year, correct?
But I guess...
Right, that's correct. You're
all right.
Right.
My question, though, Mr. Mayor, is the $25,000. It was my understanding that it was really just a moot point, that the $27,000 was going to be given to the Hispanic Center. The $25,000 was for last year, and because the ad hoc committee didn't meet, I guess it got kind of convoluted. So I guess we're dealing with two different figures here. Are we giving them 25,000 opposed to 27,000? Because in my mind, we were only giving them the $27,000 for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay,
That was my understanding. I don't know what anybody else's understanding.
All right, let me just take a quick history step back on how we got where we are, and it's just really without any swaying one way or another on the question before us, with the indulgence of the council. In 2000, the last budget cycle, the 07-08 budget, which is the current fiscal year that we're in right now, we had a grant agency review committee after a lot of discussion with all the members of the council, Republicans and Democrats alike, wanted more oversight, so we created a separate part of the budget. At that meeting, representative of the Hispanic Center came and said, look, we're having some challenges right now. At this time, our recommendation is you not fund us. And it was agreed at the meeting that when they were reorganized, had realigned their mission, they would come back in with a proposal to receive their funding for this fiscal year. And I'm not sure the exact number. It could be 25,000. That sound about right? So that was the number. Ms. Colon was hired in the fall, maybe October-ish, November? September, okay. She presented the proposal to my office around December, January. I forwarded that to the council, appointed an ad hoc committee to review the funding request for the year we're in right now. So there's that ad hoc that's out there. Mr. Riley's been appointed chairman. I believe he's done a site visit already. He's been doing some work on it, and is arranging the logistics for a meeting sometime in May for this year's funding. The motion you have on the floor tonight, okay, so because the money was not in the budget, and had been reduced out of the budget. When I drafted the budget with Mr. St. Hilaire, we did not include funding for the Hispanic Center because this council had not restored funding to this budget of this year. So at this point, you have a question on the floor to amend the current grant agency's budget for next year, the 08-09 fiscal year, to add $27,000 back in for the Hispanic Center. That's where we stand tonight. The other question of the $25,000 is currently waiting to meet. I think Mr. Riley said at some point in May they'll be meeting to meet with Ms. Colon and go over their mission statement and all the other relevant data and things like that. That would be a separate request, which Mr. Shianese has articulated he would not be supporting because at this point he's supporting the future amendment. So I didn't mean to summarize your comments, but that's where we're at. Okay? All right. Any other discussion? Mr. Perkins.
If I could have spoke, what I would have asked was how come the meeting wasn't called? And it's a bad pattern that we've developed over the years, is forming up ad hoc committees and not calling them, as one of the public speakers mentioned here earlier.
Mr. Perkins, you're a little bit off topic there, and I appreciate your thoughts. That's a discussion you have to take up offline. It's not for the dais. Any further discussion related to the amendment that's on the floor? Okay, so the amendment would be to restore $27,000 of funding back to the Hispanic Center. All those in favor of supporting the amendment, restoring the funding to the Hispanic Center, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Nay. Okay, we're going to have a raise of hands here. And one abstention, sorry. Mr. Sadi's abstained, that's easy. If you are in favor, please raise your hand. You know what, let's have the clerk call the roll, it's easier. Okay. Madam Clerk?
McMahon. No. Negersha. No. Johnson. No. Caladrino. No. Perkins.
Yes.
Viscani.
Yes.
Sheenies.
Yes.
Esposito.
Yes.
Sadi.
Abstain.
Cavo.
No.
Botello.
Yes.
Diggs. Teicholz.
No.
Arconti.
No.
Knapp.
No.
Levy.
Abstain.
Riley.
Yes.
Seabury.
No.
Stanley.
I count 10 noes, 7 yeses, and 2 abstentions. And so the motion fails. We're back to the original grant agency report. Any further discussions under the grant agency report? Mr. Shianese.
Using through the chair, using the mayor's philosophy on the Charles Ives to say that $80,000 will support 25,000 people, I'm going to make a motion that we fund the Children's Aid Center for $4,000 on that same theory that $4,000 is actually benefiting over 5,000 to 6,000 children in the city of Danbury. So if you use that same logic, we are benefiting many of our children, and $4,000 in a $202 million budget is really, it's nothing. It's pennies on the dollar. So I'd like to make a motion that we restore only $4,000 to the Children's and Family Aid.
Second. Motion is made and seconded by Mr. Visconti to restore $4,000 to the Family and Children's Aid. And just for the record, I want to note that we did not fund them because their application came in after the deadline. But having said that, I'm going to already guess that Mr. Sadi is going to recuse himself from any discussion or participation in this debate, and I want the record noted as such. Discussion about the amendment. Mr. Rotella.
Thank you, Your Honor. Where would that $4,000 come from?
That's a good question. I'm sure we can find $4,000 in next year's appropriate.
Okay, let me back up. Did the amendment include language that determined? Okay, all right, thank you.
Certainly we can find it if the amendment were to pass. Further discussion about the amendment. Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All's in favor of adding the $4,000 in for Family and Children's Aid, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's do a show. Let's call the roll.
McMahon. Yes. Nagersha. No. Johnson.
Yes.
Caladrino.
No.
Perkins.
Yes.
Visconti.
Yes.
Sheenese.
Yes.
Esposito.
Yes.
Cavo.
No.
Fratello.
Yes.
Diggs.
No.
Teichel.
No.
Arcanti.
No.
Knapp.
Yes.
Levy. Riley.
Yes.
Seabury.
No.
Stanley.
What do you got, Madam Clerk?
I didn't. No, I don't.
Hold on, I got it. 9. There'd be 9 in the affirmative. 2 abstentions. That would make 11. 8. There's 8, so that would make 8 negative. So motion fails. Yes. Further discussion related to the grant agencies. Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on adoption of the grant agency side of the budget. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. With the negatives, please raise your hand. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Sheenese, Mrs. Diggs, Mr. Riley, and Mr. Levy. One abstention. Just for the record, then, the report is adopted, but the budget is not amended to reflect those changes made to the War Memorial and the YMCA, because we did not meet the 14-vote threshold for changing the budget. If somebody's welcome to change their vote if they want to, if they're really passionate about making that change. Otherwise, the grant agencies will stay as proposed by the mayor. Just want to give you that opportunity. Okay? Seeing none, then we'll move back on to the. That concludes our reports. We'll move on to the main motion. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Cavo has made a motion to adopt the budget, seconded by Mr. Seabury. I'm just going to ask the clerk to read the resolution into the record, setting the mill rate.
A resolution levying the property tax for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2008 and ending June 30th, 2009. Section 1. The sum of $154 million, $124,126,461, representing the gross appropriation for the city of Danbury of $202,295,259 for the fiscal year of July 1st, 2008 and ending June 30th, 2009, minus indirect revenue of $44,418,798, minus use of fund balance of $3 million, minus operating transfer in of $750,000 is hereby levied and assessed on all taxable property in the city of Danbury as set forth on the annual grand list of October 1st, 2007. Section 2. Accordingly, the general fund tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2008 and ending June 30th, 2009 shall be as follows. Tax rate, 21.35 mils. Section 3. The taxes levied and assessed as hereinafter provided shall be payable in quarterly installments on July 1st, 2008, October 1st, 2008, January 1st, 2009, and April 1st, 2009, except for taxes levied and assessed on mobile homes, motor vehicles, and where not in excess of $100, which taxes shall be paid on July 1st, 2008, in accordance with the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, unless said dates shall have lapsed before the effective date of this resolution, in which case the tax collector shall fix the dates and installments as if said dates had not been fixed herein as provided by law. Section 4, the tax collector shall cause the said taxes above levied and assessed to be inserted on the tax rolls for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2008 and ending June 30th, 2009.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, we have a motion on the floor to adopt the budget, as all department reports have been reported in and accepted. I'll entertain any discussion about the budget in general as a whole. Mr. Levy?
Thank you, Your Honor. First, let me start by saying the budget review process is one of the most important jobs that the Common Council is entrusted to do for the people of Danbury. And I, like all of you, I take this extremely seriously, and you've heard me this evening vote against many of the portions of the budget because it's more that each area of the budget certainly can be justified by department heads, but it's a general overview of the budget that is disappointing to me. The portions of the budget that we didn't talk about tonight, and I was somewhat surprised, was the $2.5 million that the mayor wants to borrow for public improvements.
Mr. Levy,
that type of borrowing seems to be...
Excuse me, Mr. Levy, we're not discussing borrowing tonight. You'll have your crack at it next month. Please keep your
Certainly, I don't expect to talk about that in detail, but I just passed over the fact that I was surprised that I didn't see it. This is tied to a limitless direction of borrowing in this budget. The current concerns I have outlined in the mayor's overview of this budget, I quote, "The city will continue to increase its outstanding debt over the next 6 years to adequately finance all the projects, including the current and recently approved bond issues. Outstanding debt is projected to peak around 2011 and 2012 at $133 million. When all of the debt has been issued, we will start to see a decline of $7.3 million in the year 2017 and 2018 as the debt is paid down." The mayor also said he intends to continue with an aggressive capital plan. This is just the verbal code for saying, I want to continue to borrow, spend money that will be paid for by someone else in the future. This type of commitment totally disregards the current economic climate and puts an unnecessary hardship on the Danbury taxpayers. In this budget, almost 3 mils of your property tax go towards paying for borrowed money. This is twice as much as it was 5 years ago, and it is planned to increase every year to the year 2011-2012. In business, we borrow money with hoping to return a profit on what we borrow. In government, on the other hand, it's a not-for-profit organization, and we try to pay for everything we can as long as it doesn't exceed an amount that would break an annual budget, but typically these items are things that can be amortized over 20 years, like roofs, school buildings, things of that nature, equipment and systems sometimes. Items that are used all the time and are reoccurring purchases should be due in an operating budget. Careful pre-planning of purchases saves taxpayers the cost of borrowing. And I would make examples of that, even though they're not in this budget. But if you were to buy computer parts and you were to buy them, bond them, the technology moves so fast that more than likely the borrowed money wouldn't be paid off before the equipment was old and the technology was no longer usable. And in other items, if you were to buy things like police cars, you could stretch that buying out. You know that you have a fleet of 60 cars. If you bought 20 cars every 3 years and the life expectancy of the cars were 3 years, there's no reason why you couldn't pay for those up front.
Mr. Levy, you're way off topic here. Perhaps if you want to save some of those comments for next month when we look at that borrowing, it'd be good, but you're way into the forest.
This budget...
Borrowing, there's nothing in here, what's in front of you today about
I didn't
purchasing...
say this budget.
Mr. Levy, excuse me. I have the floor at this moment. There's nothing in there about buying police cars. You'll have your opportunity to address that at the next meeting, but try to keep your comments to the question I have.
Well, I am keeping my comments on this, talking about generally how this is constructed and reading from the narratives of the budget that you put in there. The idea of borrowing to close a gap, which I addressed in the capital portion of the budget at the subcommittee, to cover a gap in capital project is misleading. That over the years, capital budget projects are paid by federal government and they're paid by state government, and you have to have them a 5-year plan, but many of those issues the taxpayer never pays for himself. Therefore, I cannot support this budget for two main reasons. The first is because it guarantees taxpayers a minimum property tax of 6% per year till the year 2006. And many of us will pay a lot more than that as the phase-in takes place over the next 3 years. The second reason is relatively simple, and everybody's aware of it. The second reason is that the country is in an economic recession. Unemployment in the state is at a 5-year high, and we have thousands of homes foreclosed on. The groceries and utility prices have all gone up, and the last thing that Danburyans need is an increase in their taxes. We don't live in a vacuum in the city of Danbury. We're subject to what happens in the state and in the country. And throughout New England, all of the New England states are running in the red. And I see an article with even Jody Rell saying that the state will adopt last year's budget and go forward on that because they understand the impact of increasing taxes. It will be counterproductive in this community as it has been in many others. So I will be voting against this, and I think I owe it to the taxpayers to do that.
Thank you. Further discussion related to the budget. Mr. Perkins. And Mr. Coppola.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's all been said. Increased gasoline prices, increased food costs, our standard of living, for the most part, is starting to go down. We should really be curtailing our spending, not increasing our taxes by 6%. I don't know of anyone who gets a 6% salary increase, well, except some of our select department heads. The spending is just unconscionable. I think it's primarily due to poor planning and lack of accountability. Our taxpayers really can't afford this budget. And I sometimes think to myself, how can I even pay my own property taxes, being a property owner? I really can't put this additional burden on the taxpayers of this city, and I'll be voting no for this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Further discussion. Mr. Calvo.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just, at this time, would like to take the opportunity to thank all my fellow council people for what I think was a wonderful job that you did in accommodating your respective committees and the work that you did in researching your questions and your facts and your figures, and I couldn't be prouder of this body as a council for the work that they did in getting this budget to this point. I just want to say thank you to all of you for making the time and taking the time out of your schedules and being as attentive to this as you have been. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabo. Further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on the... Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Your Honor. My concerns with the budget I laid out after the committee reports of Board of Education and the Department of Public Works, and just note those for the record. Thank you.
Duly noted, Mr. Sadi. Further discussion? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on the adoption of the budget. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, signify by saying nay. Nay. Could the negatives please raise your hand? That would be Mr. Perkins, Mr. Visconti, Mr. Shinisi, Mr. Esposito, Mr. Sadi, Mr. Rotella, and Mr. Levy. That would be 7 negative, right? 7 negative. That would be 12 in the affirmative. Just for the record, having not reached the 14-vote threshold, none of the changes that were made in the reports are adopted at this time, but the budget stands adopted. Madam Clerk, item 21, please.
Resolution. Phase in of October 1st, 2007 assessment.
It's your pleasure, Counsel. Councilman Cavo.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we receive the communication and adopt the resolution which would give the City of Danbury its ability to exercise the option to allow the gradual increase of the assessed values, property values, according to Section 12-62 of the Connecticut General Statute.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Shinisi. Under discussion regarding the phase-in. Mr. Shinisi.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, through the chair, this is to the Finance Director. Can you just give a brief overview of how the phase-in will actually take place, and by giving examples of an assessment, not this year, but also how the entire phase-in will go through, just for the people in the audience and also anybody who is maybe watching?
Director of Finance.
The phase-in will occur very similarly to the way it occurred the last time the reval took place. If, for example, you had a property that the fair market value was $100, per state statute, that is going to be assessed at $70. All right, so your full assessment would be $70. And if a gradual phase-in over 4 years, we wouldn't phase it in, or we wouldn't assess it at $70. We would assess it at a portion of that. And we would assess it at, I think we would start off, and I'll just pick a number, I don't have it offhand, or I don't know exact number, but let's just say 55%. So it would be $55, or $55 it would be. And then the next year would be, whatever the number is, $59. And then the next year would be $63 or $64, and then the following year would be $70. It would bring it up in the fourth year at 70 full assessment value. And that's how the phase-in would work. All right. So what it does is it eases in just the full value. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Mr. St. Hilaire. Any other discussion regarding the phase-in? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on adopting the phase-in. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Phase-in passes unanimously. 22 through 24 are consent. Madam Clerk, item 25, please.
Resolution FEMA Fire Department grant. To Honorable Mark D. Boughton via the Common Council from David St. Hilaire, Director of Finance. Attached for your review is a resolution that will allow the City of Danbury Fire Department to apply for and accept funding from Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is FEMA, for the purchase of equipment and implementation of a wellness and a physical fitness program. The federal funding for this grant will be $462,432, with the city contributing an additional $115,608 as per grant guidelines. The Common Council is respectfully requested to consider this resolution at its next meeting.
Respectfully considered.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, Council? Councilman Johnson?
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to receive the communication and adopt the resolution.
Second. Motion made and seconded by Councilman Negasheth. Any discussion about the FEMA grant? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk, Mr. President, department reports.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we waive the reading of the departmental reports, as all members have copies, and copies are on file in the city clerk's office.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Perkins to waive the reading of the reports, as all members have a copy. Any discussion under department reports? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds. All those in favor of department reports, please. Oh, Mr. Shinisi. You have the floor.
Through the chair, the Chief Baker. Can let him sit back there all comfortable.
Chief.
Thank you, Chief. This evening there were certain comments regarding your report regarding traffic enforcement, how it decreased in number from one year to the next. And also regarding, parking on sidewalks and those other things. Can you address those concerns?
Sure. It's due primarily to personnel. We haven't been at full strength since August of 2007. We haven't had an eligibility list since October 2007, and we probably won't have an unemployment eligibility list till August 2008. We've had about 10 people that are out with injuries, and 130 people isn't enough to police the city of Danbury and do all the extras.
Mr. Shinisi.
Again, to follow up on that, so your current strength is how much? What's your number?
We're authorized 152. We have 148 right now.
And you had 130?
With injuries, disability applications, people on light duty.
But during the year, I thought at one point, weren't you at least 151 at one point?
August of 2007 was the last time we were at that point.
Why did a lot of people go and retire, or did they leave, or what's the...
Injuries.
Injuries, retirements, resignations, we've had them all.
We got a lot of people on the bench, Chief, right?
We have a lot of people on the bench.
Any other discussion under department reports? Seeing none, then I'll try your minds and acceptance of reports. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, signify by saying nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Mr. President?
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to add on an item number 29.
Second.
Deepers been made and seconded. All in favor of adding item 29, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Seconded by Mr. Negasheth. Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have item 29? Mr.
No, I have mine over there.
Madam Clerk, item 29, please.
Charlie's.
Communication. Okay, it's a communication from Scott Ferguson, tax collector, regarding Beaver Street Apartment Cooperative abatement from the state of Connecticut. Please find attached a resolution regarding the state of Connecticut real estate tax abatement for the Beaver Street Apartments Cooperative Incorporated. This is project number 0718440883, and the abatement will be in the amount not to exceed $15,000. The abatement is subject to state approval of funds for fiscal year 2007-2008. The original application is on file for signature by the mayor upon acceptance of the resolution. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Respectfully submitted, Scott M. Ferguson, tax clerk, the city of Danbury.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. What's your pleasure, counsel? Ms. Steischultz.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to receive the communication and adopt the resolution.
Second.
So made and seconded by Mr. Visconti. Is that Mr. Johnson? Okay. Any discussion about the resolution?
I'm not that old.
Seeing none, then I'll try your minds on adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have a motion carries unanimously. At this time, I'll extend all committees and look for a motion to adjourn. Made by Mr. Rotella, seconded by Mr. Sadi. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.